Hello, everybody. Welcome. Good evening. Thank you for being here in the studios at Jack Straw. This is our third of three readings, and it's still just really exciting to have people here together in the room. So thank you for being here, and thank you all out there watching, wherever and whenever you might be. My name is Levi. I work at Jack Straw. I manage the artist residency programs, and the writers program is one of those. It's always a pleasure to experience these writers and their work, and Michael, our curator, has really selected a great group, as our curators always do. So I will hand it off to them very soon. But first, I do want to thank the funders who make these programs possible, and that includes the Seattle Office of Arts and Culture, For Culture, King County Lodging Tax, Washington State Arts Commission, National Endowment for the Arts, Arts Fund, Rainier Foundation, Humanities Washington, and the National Endowment for the Humanities as part of the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, and individual contributors. Thank you, individual contributors. And yeah, we're going to be getting these writers out into the community in various ways over the coming year, and you'll be hearing them on our podcast as well. So this is just the beginning of the public portion of this program. So enjoy. Michael Schmeltzer, our curator.
Well, thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you, everyone on the internets, for watching whenever you watch this. Like Levi said, this is the last of our Jack Straw reading series events, the 3 of 3, and it is bittersweet. I've loved working with this group, and I loved hearing them. But this will not be the last event that they're going to participate in. We're trying to create opportunities all year for them. The next one that's going to be coming up is actually, let me do a little plug, Friday, June 3rd at Nepantla Cultural Arts Gallery near White Center. At 7 p.m., it's Friday, it will be starring Claudia Castro Luna and the current Poet Laureate Rena Priest, along with Vincent, Rendoni, Erin Langner, and Julie Fang from the Jack Straw program. Vincent and Erin are reading today, so if you like their stuff and want to hear more, swing by June 3rd at Nepantla and get acquainted with them. First up today is Vincent Rendoni. Listening to Vincent Rendoni read his poems is like being invited to a friend's family reunion, and every piece walks up to you, a little gleam in its eyes, and has at least one fantastical story to tell. People outrun death or wrestle a chupacabra. People split the Rio Grande by hand. You may have noticed these stories are factually a little sketchy, but as Vincent writes, never let truth get in the way of a good story, because spiritual truths are more interesting than facts anyway. I couldn't agree more as a writer. And as a reader and an editor, let me tell you another truth. These poems are celebrations of storytelling, of family, of heritage. The truth is, every poem from Vincent comes to you with tears in its eyes, and you're not really sure if it had been crying or laughing just minutes before. All you know is Vincent's work will take you by the hand and share all the joys and sorrows and wisdoms it has to offer, and I, for one, am so happy to accept it all. Please welcome Vincent.
Wow, if you see a tear in my eye right now, that is lots of joy. I want to start off with a cleansing scream. Who knows what a Greedo is? All right, you want to hear one? Oh, that feels good. You should do it too. No? All right. Well, the reason I did that is because I'm going to read my first poem. It's called A Greedo Contest in the Afterlife. As my grandfather would say, this is a true story, so. In heaven, there is a man who is muy macho. Perhaps a singing cowboy, holstering a pistol and a six-string. He parts the clouds, he shouts, turns his song into a scream. So long to desire, he is saying. So long to pain. Soon he is met by a woman who is muy macha. Perhaps it's my tia from Texas, R.I.P., who slung curses under her breath, but still kept a collection of baby Jesus figurines. She sees the man, tips her hat, and yells so long to her grief. Ha ha! St. Peter, gut hanging out his wife beater, opens his top-story window and tells them both to shut the fuck up. But you can't stop what's about to happen. A crowd gathers one by one. They come and test their might. Vendors serve beer, instant noodles, peanuts with the hot peppers and lime. Bets are placed, everybody's happy, nobody loses, all is forgiven. It can keep me up at night. I hear them when it's dark and quiet, but eventually I sleep better, knowing there's something after this life. Okay, next poem, A Family of Axolotls. It's a little cute, I guess. You're like, axolotls, yay, uh-oh. All right. Abuela leads me to the pond where he keeps a family of axolotls. They shouldn't live in a place so cold, but they exist despite logic or reason. Maybe it's he's tender with them in a way he isn't with his wife or son. He whistles to them, sings them something happy. He brings them locusts, night crawlers, such a feast. Their names are Mickey Mouse, Bugs Bunny, Salma Hayek, and El Immortal, naturally. To become Mexican, he says, I must catch one. Otherwise, I sleep outside. I reach for them. They smile, they taunt, constantly slipping from my fingertips, elusive as calm. They hang in the green water, gills throbbing, little gods looking at me with happiness, understanding. The capture never feels at hand, but then the smallest, of course the smallest, isn't quick enough. In my excitement, I catch and kill it with a crush. For once, Abuelo is quick to forgive, says nothing's been done that can't be undone. The family looks at me, still smiling, and in my fist, I feel something put itself back together again. All right. This one is called Daywalker. It's actually originally a nickname that my father gave me. You'll hear it in the poem. Why do I need to explain this shit? That's what the poem's for. My father called me the Daywalker, his revenge, told me to attack from the shadows, check that box in the applications, and get a job where I could sit down and stick my chest out knowing I'll never get pulled over going 26 on a 25. Never get called a wetback, have to put my hands on a dash, or get told you're one of the good ones by your wife. It's 1995 and we are watching Mariah Carey. She's in heaven with her boyfriend. This is the moment my father tells me I'm mixed and crosses himself and leaves a thumbprint of cinnamon on my forehead. Apologies to my first love from the Wheatlands, who snorted and laughed, saying soy mas Mexican K2 when she found out I was half. Apologies to the Midwestern girl from college and the anger in my voice when she said I didn't look Latin. For not wearing the sombrero I keep in storage. Told her to give me some credit. I kept the jean shorts. I rock the cholo plaid. I can make horchata from memory. And yes, I know J-Lo isn't Mexican, but God, that ass. But maybe you can deny me. Maybe the half is the whole, and no amount of Menudo or Selena or Duolingo gets the other back. Maybe it's hard to see, but to deny me is to deny my ancestors, my father, is to deny what it took to be here. No, we got this all wrong. It's I who denies you. All right. This next one is called El Camino. I can assure you it's like no car you've ever seen. Take it nice and fast, my father says. I pull the El Camino out of the driveway. This is the first and last time I will ever do this. The Tio who is bad with money will leave it outside his repair shop and it will never be seen again. But this isn't about the things we lost, it's about the things we had. My father is in the passenger seat, drinking a tall boy of Tecate. It is always cold and always half full. It will never run out. He hands me a sip. I like it more than I want to admit. I'm 10 years old, doing 20 on the back roads near the airport, too young to drink, too young to drive. My father tells me this is the day I become a man. This is something he decides. Go faster, he says. I fear I will lose control. My father says I can't. He won't let me. The police take notice. They pursue the 10-year-old suspect, whitish, the adult, brownish shit, drinking in the passenger seat. I feel the cool air through the vents. I feel my skin stick to the vinyl. He turns on the radio and sings along. He is laughing, even though nothing is funny. The faster we go, the lighter we feel. I hear the crack of bullets over the sound of the Doobie Brothers freight train running. They bounce off the windows and frame, not a scratch. These fools, my father says. We are invincible here. We will never die. Shit is getting serious. More blue, helicopters, the evening news, all talking about the El Camino that can't be stopped. Stay the course, mio, my father says. You will know things others don't. You will be better. They will never take us alive. They never did. Now let's talk about the Tio who is bad with money. Shout out to all of my dad's shady friends. The Tio who is bad with money doesn't know why everybody says he's bad with money. He shows me a stack of dirty bills and wads me a 20 through a greasy handshake. He says that's for being a man, but could I look a little less queer? See, the Tio who is bad with money says what's on his mind. He doesn't listen. He doesn't follow the rules. He's not open to your advice. He's going out the way he lived, muchacho, on a chopper without a helmet, because there's nothing to protect when you've got shit for brains. His words, not mine. Yet the Tio who is bad with money lives in the suburbs with his wife, where over Costco lasagna dinners he shows off his knives and says to never let your guard down because that's when they get you. But he can never tell me who they are. We always forgive the Tio who is bad with money because he saw some shit in the Navy. We let him have his cheap thrills, his OnlyFans accounts, Jack in the Box tacos, his thermos of Crown and Coke. We let him have his late nights at the truck stop, watching the truckers and drifters sink into their fast food and fried cheese, wondering, where do they all come from? He officiated my wedding, he fixes flats. He smells like Coraleo and oak, but still has bad gas. To the ladies, he's Charlie Oso. Watch your ass, he knows Hapkido. Say yes if he asks you to drive him home. Give him a break, he's great with kids, really, any except for his own. I haven't seen him in years. He died a long time ago. He's still kicking it. He probably doesn't have long. He's to sit down and take a good look at himself and eat a goddamn vegetable. He really needs to not call me by my dead father's name, but I can let that last one go. Right. This one's called Juana Turns to Sugar. I think this was about diabetes, but I'll be frank with you, I don't know where I was going with this, but people seem to like it. Okay. Early in the 21st century, a disease spread all over the world. All hail the new emperor of maladies, we said. All hail the sweet death. It started at the toes as a fine powder, then turned to jagged crystals, working its way up the body. If we could amputate early, lucky you. If not, well, I suppose the bright side is that it didn't hurt, and you had time to say your goodbyes, though you lost a bit of yourself when it rained, and the less we talk about the flies, the better. Don't believe me? Look it up. See how those images sit in your stomach. Let them churn and turn over. See those people struggling to breathe. See how you feel stupid. Juana came to my grandparents for help. She was young, a prima from the fatherland, half translucent from the waist down, the first person my abuelos, the famed curanderos, failed to save. We summoned the sun. It came. We spread rice and confetti around her bed. She slept. We burned dandelions and mint. The fire spread. We laughed at Satan and his smoke. He stepped out for a quick five. Honestly, I don't know where we went wrong. The morning of, we found her golden brown, shining like the dawn, smelling like home, a would-be forever fossil this moment. But nothing goes to waste, not in this economy. Abuela blessed a mallet, Abuela brought it down, cracking Juana into shards and pieces. She made her way into our coffees, our bread, for months. Whenever I eat something sweet, I say a little thanks, and think of how she lives with us, and the lies our loved ones tell, and I think about how the world is on fire, and all we can think of is to eat each other. All right. Who was that show, The Legends of the Hidden Temple? I have some thoughts about that. You're gonna hear them. All right. In the worst of all my nightmares, I am being filmed live before a studio audience in Florida, where a man with bleached teeth and feigned enthusiasm pushes me into a maze. The giant of an Olmec mover and shaker who, despite being made of rock, is somehow fleshy, frowns at me, because he knows all things time and space, including the outcome of this game. I brave jaguars and scorpions in the dry season, abruptly followed by a rain of arrows and chanclas. I am doing well, but soon I feel the rolling thunder of an evil Rudo with a toxic fan base who is coming to take my mask, which I think is a metaphor for my soul. But I don't take much stock in dreams since Abuela's dreamcatcher failed me. Anyway, I am losing track of time right on schedule, and the temple is growing dark despite an ample budget for lighting. Mayan mystics and Aztec warriors joined the Rudo in the hunt and bloodlust, and it's not very historically accurate, and frankly a little offensive, but there's no time to consider this. From their seats, the crowd intervenes. They move my arms and legs in ways that can't bend and shout conflicting directions. Soon this will be over, and my failure to be broadcast in reruns will be well known amongst millennials of a certain age. Because even though I get what I came for, the point is to leave this place alive, which I know and you know I won't. Right. This next one is called Find Me a Pear Tree. This is actually based off an old Latin American folktale about a woman who tricked death by basically chasing him up into a tree and then he couldn't come down. It's better if you read it. That wasn't a very good explanation. In his last lucid moment, my father tells me about his abuela, Concepcion. I asked when she died. He slams his insurer like a shot and says she's still alive. She should be about 140, but won't look a day over 25. He says I can find her high in a pear tree on a highway outside Laredo, eating overripe fruit, listening to Chente on repeat on a tinny radio, saying the names of all the animals forever trying to get a blackout on interstate bingo. I say, okay, Dad, and ask if he wants to listen to a ball game. Okay, son. He lets me in on the secret of her immortality. Death had chased her until he keeled over. Pause for laughter. Tried everything. Whooping cough, infections of the blood, bandits, soldiers, scammers, first husbands, green skies, inauspicious winds, bulls that gore. But let's not forget his go-tos, hunger, loneliness, and thirst. Chased her up into that pear tree, big mistake. Told her to come right down, blew that asshole a raspberry. Turns out the Sandman can't climb, got himself found out. Commercial break. When the Mariners score, you score. 2-for-1 jumbo jacks. My dad says it's a pretty good deal. I agree, it's a pretty good deal. I say, so she stayed in the tree. He said, yes, she stayed in the tree. She raised a family up there, met another man, nursed his children, led filthy toasts, strung up piñatas, kept a song and dance going until everyone else died out while the big man circled in pace like the dog he is at the trunk below. I hear cheers. We've got a tie game going. There's still a chance. The lesson here, my father says, the lesson here, the lesson. He jumps from his bed and grabs my face, pulls me close, heart in his head, mouth a black hole, and says, we've got to find that pear tree. That's how we stop this. Pull the car around. I remember these sounds. A cracked bat, smooth leather under a pop fly, 3 up, 3 down, says the whiskey-laced announcer. A half-dead Pocho's heavy breathing inward and outward, hoping his body has it in him for one last climb. We never did find that pear tree. He's been gone 14 years now. Still, I never stopped looking. And this last poem I'm going to read, it's called Dead Father Resurrects in an Azteca. And this is not meant to make fun of Azteca. Dirty secret is I think a lot of, I like Azteca. I think a lot of Mexicans do. Everybody likes it, right? You know? So don't take offense. I'm still open for a partnership if you're listening, someone from Azteca. Let's get the party started. Come for the quesadillas, stay for the resurrection. Someone kicks off the jukebox like he's the Fonz. War, the Cisco kid, he's a friend of mine. The crowd is restless, the crowd keeps coming, and they need this almost as much as I do. My father bursts through the suicide doors of the kitchen. Slick as shortening, he swerves his hips like a brown Elvis, lining up and shooting down the barflies. The pretty young things there to witness the greatest comeback in history. Whistles, applause. He always knew how to give the crowd what they want. God is good, but he's especially good to my father. When he returns, he's in his prime. Easy Rider mustache, members-only jacket, pompadour glistening with Brill cream, no trace of yellow in his eyes. He demands a feast, demands Christmas-colored chips with a thick, immovable cheese, deep-fried ice cream with the exploding straws, and definitely don't forget that thick, jiggly flan. After all, who gives a fuck about blood sugar in the great beyond? And under the watch of cross-bearing gawkers, lacquered parrots, and the worst Norteño band on the planet come the questions. How is my sister? How is my mother? How are his brother and the twins? Do we have money? Do we have somebody? Do we ever get grandma out of that home? I hate to be the one to tell you, but the dead have the memory of a damn goldfish. He's here for a good time, not a long time. I tell him what he wants to hear. I learn from the best. We'll do this again next year. But let's not get away from the miracle at hand. Father and son having the drink they always said they would. We get the añejo, we crush some pull tabs, and we look over our shoulders only sometimes, waiting for someone bigger than you or me to take him home again. Thank you all.
So Vincent, my wife Lydia makes fun of me because I like Azteca, and she is too good for Azteca. So we're gonna go one of these days. We'll set up a reading. The next reader today is Erin Langner. Erin Langner is technically an essayist, but it feels more accurate to call her a creator of literary time capsules. Every word, every detail uncovered, manages to transport a reader to whatever time and location of Erin's choosing. Sometimes it's the unfinished basement of her grandmother's house. We can almost feel beneath our feet the black plastic cover stapled to the stairs. Other times we are at the mall in the late 90s holding up a pair of coveted skates. It should be no surprise that Erin's work as an art critic, her experience with museums, creates an exceptionally strong ability to catalog moments in such a beautiful, thoughtful, and thought-provoking way. No matter where and when we are in these essays, we are guided by Erin's strong narrative voice and keen eyes, practically Sherlockian in their ability to seize just the right details to evoke the zeitgeist and emotional core of any particular moment. Please welcome Erin Langner.
Thank you so much, Michael, for that thoughtful introduction, and for all your work supporting this program. And thank you to Levi and Joan and all of the sound engineers at Jackstraw. This has been incredible. And thank you all for being here and everyone online. Tonight I'm reading an excerpt from an essay called Seeing Pink. It's not in the anthology, so don't try to follow along. But it is from the same body of work that uses some of my favorite works of art to re-see my experiences growing up in the Chicago suburbs. So the section of this essay is called Untitled Film Still Number 3. I like to think my mother looked like the artist Cindy Sherman. I see it mostly in their profiles, which match, particularly their noses. The structured triangular form immediately conjures certain attributes: refined, poised but subdued, and most of all, memorable. Your nose has personality, a lover once told me. I'd taken this to mean that mine has the same distinct shape, if only because it's such a rare part of a woman's body to discuss. That mine had become the subject of pillow talk made me think I inherited something important. The first time I saw my mother in Cindy Sherman's work was in the Untitled Film Stills. These are a series of 70 black and white photographs the artist made early in her career in the 1970s and 80s. They show imaginary characters enacting scenes inspired by actual film stills from mid-century B movies, without referencing anyone in particular. The characters are all played by Sherman herself, outfitted in wigs and vintage clothing and makeup in varying degrees of excess. The photograph I saw my mother in first was Untitled Film Still, number 3. In this one, Sherman is dressed up as a housewife, standing at a kitchen sink beside a dish rack, a bottle of ivory soap, a juice jug, and a carton of salt. She's clutching her stomach right across the center, where the tie of her apron meets the hem of her mock neck. She's clutching as if she's pregnant and unsure of what it all means for her. The most straightforward overlap between Sherman and my mother is their age difference, which is less than 2 years. Sherman's still living, while my mother died of breast cancer when she was almost 40 and I was almost 10. But they're both of the post-war generation. Their mothers were among the white American suburban women who were sold a rosy femininity, that moment of return to the household after a brief wartime professional life. It was the time of Dior's hourglass new look dress on the cover of Vogue, and the pink powdered colored aprons, and the shampoos and lipsticks at local Woolworths. My mother's mother worked part-time as a hostess at the Drake Hotel, but she still chastised my mom for considering going back to work once my sister and I were born. Enough so that my mom quit her job as a nurse. What kind of mother chooses not to be with her children? I can imagine, though I never heard my grandmother spouting such words. But I recall my mom slamming our kitchen phone into its plastic base on the wall enough times to know they didn't get along and never really had. My mom was a daddy's girl, but my grandfather turned on her too. Listen to your mother, it's for the best. His tone was always more passive, but still laced with hardness. And then she was just left with us, which, as a mom myself, I now know means its own kind of aloneness when kids are so small and need so much of you that it can feel like the present is eternal and suffocating, not suffering. Like you'll never be your other non-mother self again. Besides looking like my mother, the other part of Untitled Film Still number 3 I always notice is a narrow, blurred object of some kind. Maybe a pan in the dish rack. It points directly at Sherman's heart, but it's so close to the camera lens that it's blurred. Your eye thinks that it should ignore it, but once you see it, you wonder how you didn't notice it there the whole time, slicing through the middle of the picture. They were women struggling with something, but I didn't know what, Sherman wrote of the series. I see this threatening object as the embodiment of that struggle. Trying to understand that struggle is what keeps bringing me back to these photographs again and again. Each untitled film still is suggestive of a story surrounding the characters that doesn't exist. These women are narrativeless, which makes me want to construct one for them. What's great about the film stills is they're not so much about what you look at, but they're also about what happened before and what happens after, said the artist Roberto Longo. He was living with Sherman when they were working on the series, and he took some of the photos since she was always in them. Because my mother died when I was so young, I have endless gaps in her story and endless questions about what happened before and what happened after each image that remains in my brain. Right after she died, I had no desire to collect and archive everything the way that I do right now. I didn't want to be that girl who's always crying, or God forbid, openly weeping, a phrase I'd heard and never wanted applied to me, in all of its weakness, frailty. So I willed myself to forget. Now, I'm left with the basic arc of her life, as told to me in pieces by my father and grandparents. She grew up in the western Chicago suburbs. She wished to be an artist. She became a lifeguard. She went away to college. She came back to suburban Illinois, became a nurse, then a stay-at-home mom. The part that I remember is she was working her way towards being a nurse again just before she died. And now I know that when someone dies, the unhappy memories are sacrificed for the ones that everyone likes to talk about repeatedly. Your mother loved swimming. Your mother was a smoker until she found out she was having you. Your mother quit her job because she loved being with you so much. These are some that I remember my family saying the most. They're reinforced by the photos I saw over the years, most now reduced to mere memories themselves. My mother in a one-piece navy blue bathing suit, treading water among the waves of a lacy pool. My mother looking down as she holds me up to blow out the candles on a cake topped with wooden blocks that spell my name. My mother in a green and blue striped polo shirt, her face frozen into what I think of as her fake smile, thin lips pressed tightly together, turned up at the edges, as if she's about to say something sarcastic, her eyes veering upwards, almost about to roll, as if there's a joke being told, though no one can remember what it was. There's also an image of my mother that feels like a photograph, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't exist. It's a woman standing behind a kitchen sink. Her hair is shoulder length, parted down the center, bound back in a ponytail, lightly curled at the ends. Frame is narrow, the way she liked it. She's wearing a white cable knit sweater, long khaki shorts. And above the kitchen sink is a window with airy cream-colored curtains. The window is where my mother would watch. It's also where I can picture her laughing, where I think of her crying. I do not see her bent over the stove, even though she did most of the cooking, even though she didn't really seem to like cooking. I do not picture her sitting at the table, and perhaps this is because when I was playing outside and looked up, I would find my mother's eyes staring through the glass, narrowed and looking out somewhere beyond me and the yard and the straight-laced sidewalks, which ignites the question of what she was looking at. The first time I saw Untitled Film Still number 3 was while I was interning at a museum just up the street on the campus of the University of Washington, studying tours. It was the only film still included in an exhibition that emphasized looking, called 150 Works of Art. Each work in the show was situated on its own, centered on a black, easel-like stand, and they were organized in chronological order and scattered through this massive open gallery space, each one topped with its own glowing light bulb. The artist who designed the display likened it to music stands in an orchestra. But as I entered the gallery, I always felt like I was descending into a constellation of art. On the tours, the guide would stop in front of Sherman's small black and white photograph, and the 5 or 6 people on the tour would form a tidy circle around her, and all the guides always began with the same question. What do you see? There's usually a long pause before people started answering. A woman in the kitchen, washing dishes, thinking. She looks sad, or concerned, or pensive, and alone. They didn't usually say she looked like she was in a movie. I'd recently learned what do you see was part of a technique called the visual thinking strategy, or VTS. At its simplest, the goal of VTS is to teach someone how to look. It was developed by a psychologist and a museum educator in the late 1980s, when research revealed that people visiting the MoMA left without remembering much of what they saw. It turned out that most visitors needed to be prodded towards really looking, rather than just going through the motions. Now most museums use VTS on their tours in some form. So the guide could mostly step back from the conversation after that first question, letting the responses become the art story. They addressed erroneous claims if needed, but that seemed rare. Questions about the artist's biography or the context didn't even come up most of the time. People seemed content with what they were able to see by themselves. At the time, this made sense to me. It made art approachable, equitable, pre-existing knowledge wasn't required. It made complicated art feel graspable. It opened interpretations rather than imposing a curator understanding on people. But I also felt a little uneasy with the idea that a work of art could be anything I wanted it to be if I reconfigured the details in my mind just so. And I find myself asking the same question. What do you see? Of the images of my mother that linger in my mind. But as I look through these details until I find one that resonates, I worry that I'm making up a story that is untrue, that I'm overlaying my mother's real narrative with one I've constructed, that I'm turning a person into a Rorschach test, or what I am seeing says more about me than it does about her. Thank you.
I think at one point in a conversation with Erin, I told her that she was very intimidating because I felt like she would very much see me in a way that I thought I could not hide anything. And it's so apparent in how they write that it is so beautiful and observational. I should mention, Erin has a book forthcoming from Zone 3 Press. What is the title again?
Souvenirs from Paradise.
Souvenirs from Paradise, and it is coming out
November 1st.
November 1st, so yay! Everyone should look for that. Go to Zone 3 Press, pre-order when it comes out, support the work of all our artists here. Okay, next up, Carrie Beyer. I once described Carrie Buyer's poetry as one of those seemingly gentle rivers, deceptive in its beauty. But the minute you dip your feet in, you realize with a cold shock that there is the most ferocious water coursing underneath. There is power and a surprising danger to Carrie's poetry, a sharpness that can move us as much as it can mutilate. Luckily, in Carrie's expert hands, we are left with lyricism and lore and liberation, even if it comes with a few cuts. There is a subtext of violence in Carrie's poetry, a necessary theme in order to tell the story of motherhood, of birth and desire, of religious patriarchy. Within these traditions, the voices of women emerge, unloosed and unsilenced. It is a spiritual and lyrical awakening written in verse with a revolutionary heart. Let me not vanish in this impossibility of gray, Carrie writes. Anyone who reads or listens will know this is a voice that will not vanish anytime soon. Please welcome Carrie Buyer.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you, Levi, Aisha, all the Jack Straw folks. It's been so wonderful to be in the studio. I was, considering not making the trek over from Bainbridge a couple of weeks ago, and I just felt so much at home once I got here. So it's just such a gift to hear everybody's work and to share my own. Thank you for being here. 2 Corinthians 5:4. While we are still in this tent, we groan, being burdened, not that we would be unclothed, but that we would be further clothed. We would rather be away from the body. 1. Among thousands of mouths I speak. You placed a white stone on my lips, but my throat thirsts for wildfire and locusts. 2. I grew up in my father's grassland, on my back, gathering blades one by one. My skin chafed from the heat, the chiggers, the dying alfalfa. At the house, my father's cousin came. My skin became someone else's, too soft. I learned to be alone, survived by grassland, hardened my flesh by what lived there. 3. But a script rolled in my brain. I followed a young man to the sea as if bound. At the shore, he offered a sponge to heal my scabbed body. I cursed at him. 4. What sour comfort to return, to lie beneath that bowl of prairie sky. Oh God, to know I have moved my bed to a new and secret chamber, to know I dip my finger in pure water. 5. God, sometimes I still flinch when you see me naked. I repeat what I want to be true. You are not here to harm me. When the men rose. When the men rose in Baden and would not raise a weapon because the Lord had chastised Peter for the sword, conviction whispered, "Go." They saw the banners of America snapping with promises. How little they needed, only land surrounding them, and the warm array of like-minded folk. To be enfolded by melodies of the Heimatland in the homes of men named Werkler, Strom, Kellenberger, Auberly, caused faith to blossom in their breasts. They did not think to ask what the women wanted, knowing only that they liked them simple, without adornment, and strong enough for the labors of farming and childbirth. How to be submissive. They say I am too wary, too watchful. But isn't that what they trained me to be? Watchful of my nipples as they swelled away from my rib cage. Insulated by others who also sprout these mysterious parts, I withdraw my legs beneath full skirts until one man might lift them and find his pleasure. Didn't I learn to pitch my voice exactly so as to beautifully blend, hovering just below, being noticed within the congregation? They say smile. They say do not smile, lest I become a temptation. They say this as if I am a slice of cake. They say to serve the largest portions of cake first to the men. I want to stop thinking about my body. I want to understand what makes it so startling, so dangerous to the oncoming eye. Prayer of a woman in the assembly. A man is praying. We, the congregation, have knelt, knees to carpet. It could be any man, brother, husband, great uncle. How easily he makes sounds of reverence, fits his mouth around phrases like, for thy name's honor and glory, and acceptable unto thee. What would I say, Lord? Cull the birds from the sky? Silence me ever homeward? Let me not vanish in this impossibility of gray. When we could not speak, we sang. I didn't love the melodies or the words. I loved the fabric of voices around me as our flesh yearned toward an understanding of the way to Zion. It was like our mother spooned the pews, baptistry, lunch trays, close-snap carpeting, every skirt and dress and covering into our mouths till the tears ran from our eyes. She wasn't allowed to say anything because her throat, so clogged with hymnals, could not articulate. I opened up. I think she nodded, good girl. And from our crammed mouths we sang together, I never will forget this crying. In faith I'll trust it all my days. I loved the words. I did. They swung like a broken door, more hinge than door. My freedom is gone, our anthem of accomplishment. Jesus Christ, we're told. Jesus Christ, we're told, had a penis like other men. But instead of getting a simple wife, his bride will be the whole church. I try not to imagine the orgy following that heavenly feast because in this congregation, the clothing is allotted by the body assigned to each at birth. Thus, I get to thinking of Jesus behaving more as these elders do, sitting on their throne-shaped chairs in the front of the sanctuary. Gazing on them, I don't think about sex at all. The curtain that hides the baptismal tub is pulled shut. Of course, on baptism Sundays, the curtain opens like a vulva, everything fleshy and wet, and the girls who have carefully hid themselves in skirts now have water dripping from them. You can see through their blouses like they have just gone swimming in a pond with boyfriends. The mothers unfurl the towels, and when the girls merge back into the pews, their faces are shining and their bodies reclothed, their hair only slightly wet. In the gospel, a woman weeps all over Jesus' feet, caressing him with oil, her long tresses unpinned. And Jesus himself touched each of the disciples' feet. It was cultural, better to have no questions. I am relegated to this side of the church because I have breasts, and I've grown my hair and pinned it away until my wedding night. I can recite the expectations. No holes shot through the ears, no pants on women for God's sake, no saying God's sake as if we knew what he wanted. Killing, too, is a form of our ancient wandering affliction. When the mind stays serene, whatever happens to us is good. Rainer Maria Rilke, The Sonnets to Orpheus. Field dressed. To Dad. The single women wait, each one with fingers laced together, each a bowed head shadowing a face. After a brother blesses Sister Ruby's church lunch, we grip the handles of hot carafes to pour coffee into the men's porcelain cups. Our arms are smooth and pale, snaking between the sheen of black suits to serve without touching male shoulders. This is your Sunday table. You sit and chuckle with Rodney, Uncle Fred, Donnie Plattner. Not many leave town. The girls, meanwhile, become adolescents. Good ones grow their hair out and start to stuff their mouths with stones. I can return to this wax museum whenever I wish, unlike the lost winter hilltop with your 243 and you, where I squatted, hidden behind the bales, sure of the metal you'd placed in my hands. Give me a target, and I do not misfire. You said yes, yes, at my baptismal proving. Satisfied, you approved your daughter as a church sister. I had done everything dead on. In the snapshot with the gutted deer, my orange jacket, teeth and eyes glare. A year later, I'd be promised to a boy not much older than me. You didn't stop the marriage. Wouldn't have stopped anything that seemed good enough. But I pushed another stone in my mouth, as I had seen other wives do. I grew ashamed of the rifle, ashamed I wanted to kill. Hunched with you on that hilltop, our cheeks froze, our breath came out like ghost fruit. You pointed to the young buck cutting a line across the clearing. I had already cradled its head in the sight, moved one finger. The deer surged into the air and fell. I shouted and ran toward it, you laughing at my delight. The buck breathed heavily. You spread the back legs, slit the hide. The organs steamed, spilling armfuls of stomach, liver, intestines onto the grass. You pointed out the place my bullet had punctured a lung. I watched you at the church table, tasting a pecan roll. Do not pity me. Trapped under a veil, the unsayable began to bloom. You taught me to discharge a bullet into silence. Thank you.
Before we begin the last reader for tonight, I just want to say thank you again to Levi and everyone at Jack Straw for creating such a wonderful program and for allowing me to be a part of it. And to all the Jack Straw writers at home or here, it has been just a tremendous, tremendous honor to work with all of you and learn from you and hopefully get you to a point where you're all publishing and having books out, and I can just sit back and read and enjoy them all. Okay, so Ruth, the last one. I had so much fun writing my little intro for you. I'm so excited. I have to admit, when I first read Ruth Schemmel's Jack Straw application, I was a little nervous. So, her project is a collection of short stories about difficult women. And for a brief moment, I thought, is Ruth difficult? I mean, if there's anything society says we should fear or despise or ignore, it's difficult women. But if there's one thing I cannot ignore, it's a talented writer. And Ruth is very talented and very smart and very funny. And for the record, it's been fantastic working with you, Ruth. Ruth's writing explores gender, sexuality, and social class with humor, insight, and the kind of affection for the characters that makes you root for them. Observing the invisible rules and barriers of these various social markers, and at times subversively crossing them, it becomes a little more clear that difficult shouldn't be feared, but revered and respected. Difficult in Ruth's writing ends up meaning human, complicated, messy, empowered, unlikable, yet absolutely worthy. In the end, it's easy to love every difficult aspect of Ruth's writing. Please welcome Ruth Schemmel.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, everyone at Jack Straw. What an honor to read after those 3 powerful readings. Those were amazing. This is a work of fiction. It's called Mousetrap. You know why we wear lipstick, don't you? Aubrey, for some reason, finds herself saying. Makes men think of vulvas. Excuse me? Her date stops chewing. What is his name? Hubert. His name is Hubert, and he works in game design. Video games, she's already embarrassingly asked him to confirm. Not like Monopoly or Mousetrap. Mousetrap, he'd asked? That's the game you think of when you think of games? Actually, when Aubrey thinks of games, she thinks of the things she's doing with Ivan. Married, Ukrainian, religious Ivan. Ivan, who manages an assisted living home and who, questionably, despite the very real threat of COVID in those frightening pre-vaccine days, took her mother in for hospice and allowed Aubrey to visit her until the end. You could say Ivan saved her life, and you could say what she's doing now, what she's done anyway, with Ivan, twice in her Subaru while parked on the street at night by the assisted living home, and once in the bathroom of her mother's old room in the home itself, is thanking him. Hubert is her attempt at something healthier, this coffee and muffin date. All the coffee and muffin dates she set up for herself in recent months. Because Aubrey is impressed with Hubert despite herself, impressed anyway with the video game thing, she's resolved not to seem so. Lipstick, she says, it's why we wear it. We, meaning all women? She's what, a spokeswoman now for womankind? She who automatically fell silent in the presence of more than one woman, outwomaned, who always felt like a woman imposter? Well, there were none here now to challenge her credentials. Vulvas, Hubert repeats. Weird, huh? You're wearing lipstick, he says, with a dumb, low grin that makes her hate him a little, but also makes him less impressive, easier to dismiss. You're wearing lipstick right now. How had she not seen this trap when she herself had constructed it and wide-eyed walked right in? Yes, Aubrey says assertively, but not for the same reasons. Why then? Culture, tradition, conformity, not rocking boats. I didn't realize you were such a rule-abiding woman. Hubert flicks his eyes down what he can see of her body, damaged from cancer and chemo. Not that it's likely he can tell. Her foobs, anyway, her fake boobs, stand their ground. Hello and welcome, they seem to say. He dodges her eyes, saving them both a moment of recognition in which it might become obvious he was thinking about her vulva. And she was thinking he was thinking about her vulva. Or else something's off about the foobs. Let's talk world cinema, Aubrey says, impatient. Let's talk Almodovar. What's your take? I'm indifferent, I guess. Indifferent. Well, that scraps my theory. What's your theory? Hubert has given up eating altogether and is just watching her now, something flinty in his smile, as if he's trying to guess the punchline to this particular joke. The joke of Aubrey being his date, the joke that this meeting might lead anywhere, to anything. Forget it. She's suddenly weary, tired of being looked at. Unless she's wearing rude lingerie beneath her social worker skirt sweater combo, and the one doing the looking is Ivan. Maybe she'll see Ivan this afternoon, after all. Let's get back to vulvas, she says. No, I want to hear the theory. All right. It's the theory of assholes. Her heart is already not in this. But the show must go on, she imagines her mother, dead now, declaring. Not her actual mother, but the version of her mother she'd believed in as a child. Her fun and surprising mother, not at all beaten down by life, not yet reduced to what she finally became, rueful, merely obedient, politely answering question after question of her cancer surgeon, who used her zany answers to prove that her brain was not worth operating on, that she had not enough mind left to save. She thinks it's 2053. She thinks Ronald Reagan is president. Assholes, Aubrey says, tend to like Almodovar and talk about him at great length, as if they understood him. Pretentious assholes, I mean, who are men, American men, US born, I should say, of a certain age, like you. What if adversity doesn't bring wisdom? What if you can stumble blindly through life, hurting people, hurting yourself, bringing flawed, damaged children into the world to suffer on their own, essentially learning little to nothing, and then die, still not having learned? This question first impressed itself upon Aubrey in the stunned early days after she received her cancer diagnosis, just a few months after her mother's passing to cancer and Alzheimer's. Body and mind going off together into a sunset, why not? Hand in hand, as if finally acknowledging a long secret affair everybody already knew about anyway. I'm too stupid to die, was Aubrey's thought. How could this be? I've learned nothing. And had her mother learned anything? Had her mother really lived? Short answer, nothing, and no. Aubrey was newly single through both of these traumas. Her mother's death, her own diagnosis and treatment, her journey, as work friends insisted on calling it, having divorced her loyal Midwestern husband over a dispute about what color to paint the living room wall. Puce was the color Aubrey had fixated on, had insisted upon against all reason. Mousetrap, that's what it was. She'd gone after what she thought was the cheese. Freedom, adventure, more life, and had been tricked into letting go of this sort of dull, solid man whose usefulness and worth were apparent to her now in the complicated weathering through parts of human existence. No regrets, anyway, she told herself. Or, as her daughter liked to say, quoting a famous meme of a man proudly displaying his misspelled tattoo, no regrets. Aubrey comes home from her date craving sleep more than anything, more even than Ivan. But if she's smart about it, she can manage both. A time for all things, to reap, to sow, to take a YouTube sleep hypnosis-assisted power nap, to drop in for a surprise quickie with Ivan, all before he picks up his kids from school at 3 o'clock. But she's thwarted by the unexpected presence of her daughter, 17-year-old Mags, huddled over her phone at the kitchen counter with her impish school friend, Zell. Aren't you guys supposed to be at school? It's Wednesday. Mags delivers a canny stare, daring Aubrey to say she doesn't know what this means. And then she remembers. Her daughter gets out early on Wednesdays. Always has. Mags has recently acquired a secret life, Aubrey believes, evidenced by a string of tardies and missing assignments at school, an F in an advanced math class she either can't or won't fix, and, topping it all, a cigarette butt she's found in the yard, of which Mags denies all knowledge. The cigarette butt, more than anything else, makes Aubrey feel like a shitty parent. Anyone's kid might struggle in school, but only the most egregiously neglected become smokers. So how was school? Aubrey says. School? Mags makes her face a perfect blank. Awesome. Homework? Some. Zell, meanwhile, has gotten off her stool and started to creep, sock-footed, toward where Aubrey stands in the center of the kitchen. Aubrey steps back. For a moment, their eyes meet, the girl's as cold as a killer's. Then Zell throws up her arms, a cross between jazz hands and don't shoot, turns herself sideways and slips past Aubrey to the snack drawer. Aubrey watches the girl, whom she's seen in the house maybe twice, rip open a new box of Power Bars and take one. Help yourself to any snacks. Thanks, Aubrey. Zell's pale eyes rest on Aubrey's. So, Aubrey, how was your date? Mags says to her, using her name, not Mom. An amusing bit of sass Mags has been trying out lately, possibly following Zell's lead. Yet it irks Aubrey more than it should. Let's talk about the cigarette butt I found in the yard last week, Aubrey says, to remind them both she is the parent. She intends for it to sound lighthearted, a quip. Instead, it sounds unhinged. Is there anything you want to say to me? I don't know anything about it, Aubrey. Already told you that. Jesus. Hey. A line has been breached. She breached it first, bringing up the cigarette butt in the presence of a friend. There went their unspoken contract. Pretend everything is fine as long as someone else is watching. And when they're alone, no pretenses then. No particular tension either. They understand each other, give each other space. Mags's response to Aubrey's cancer diagnosis was, "Oh, really? Wow." Cancer mom, she started calling her. It became a joke between them. Yet when Aubrey once told her what she thought was a funny story about what a geek and misfit she'd been in high school, Mags had responded in fury. "Stop, Mom," she'd said. She'd been near tears. What if no one ever finds out what a good heart her daughter has? Aubrey wonders, after Mags and Zell have slipped away. What if Aubrey is the only one who knows? What if she never finds a passion for anything, never shines? What if she really is a smoker? Her lungs growing tarrier, blacker by the day. The feeling this gives her, like being buried alive, makes Aubrey crave one thing, one person, the scent of his asphyxiating, thought-blotting cologne, which she can't believe the old people tolerate. Maybe they, like her, are stunned into grateful silence by the gift of him, the dumb, blunt fact of him, and can't be bothered to complain. His plump white torso when his shirt is off, his soft hands on her ribs, her scars, his undeniability, his matter-of-fact there-ness, the way he makes her matter-of-factly there. Not here, Ivan says, when Aubrey has finally gotten past the health aide at the door and found him in his office. But she can see from his stricken expression, from the way he's breathing, visibly, chest rising and falling, that here is as fine as the next place. It's a while before, kneeling on the utility carpet, she notices the cigarette butt. Only gradually does it acquire significance, like the little waving white legs of Icarus in the famous painting. The one tiny detail that throws the whole thing off. Are you? She can't finish the question. He follows her eyes. A smoker? He laughs, pinches the cigarette butt with a tissue and drops it in the trash. Not really, very rarely. You never smelled it on me, no? Ivan, are you? Aubrey, what is it? What's wrong? He's so lovely in his concern for her, so earnest. This is the man who reads Charles Dickens to the old folks, or the newspaper. Sometimes he sings. She can't ask. He's not the one to ask. If her mother were alive, Aubrey would tell her a version of her hasty, unexplained retreat, past the old folks in their recliners, her foobs tucked under an arm. Her mother would have laughed, that gentle hooting she offered to every account of Aubrey's scrapes and misadventures, which, Aubrey realizes, is how she always portrayed her life to her mother, as if she were the spunky antihero of a sitcom. She wouldn't tell her about the cigarette, about her darkest fears. It was a family malady to think bad things, to be convinced of them. Her mom would have thought the worst. Rather than drive home, Aubrey heads to the nearby city where her mother used to live. Late sun blazes over the waterfront, visible from the Tony downtown. She wanders the wide sidewalks among silver-haired women in capes and nubbly knee-length sweaters. A wind gusts up and an old woman stumbles. Aubrey catches her elbow, her bones as light as a bird's. Her mother would never get this old. She feels hurt on her mother's behalf, as if this were just one more club she'd been excluded from. At the town's theater, the marquee announces a new film by Almodovar. Sign from God? Practical joke? Aubrey can't decide. For one dizzy moment, she considers calling Hubert. You know what? I actually do like men who like Almodovar, she could tell him. Buy you a ticket? Instead, she calls Mags, who picks up right away. Hello, Mags says and waits, even though she must know it's Aubrey. She sounds less hardened on the phone, still reachable. Okay. Stay like that, Aubrey thinks. Stay. Hello? Mom? Are you there? Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Michael, again for assembling this wonderful group of writers. Thank you all 12, all 4 of you tonight, and all 12 for this year. If you haven't seen the other readings, check them out on our YouTube and Facebook places. And again, if you're not on our email list, get on it and you'll find out about all the other ways we're presenting these writers over the next year. So thanks a lot for coming out. Have a great night.